Hey everyone, just driven down to Pritter Castle here on my lunch. See if I can get a better shot than the trees there. It's all closed up obviously. There we go. I think that's a little bit better there. A lot of history around Pritter Castle. It's built as a Norman fort in the 11th century. And then it fell under the ownership of the Dumfrivilles, or the Umfrivilles. I mentioned them when I was down Whittledean. They weren't happy with the construction of Nafferton Tower, which is why it was never finished. It was going to stand higher than the castle. There's more history than folklore around this castle really, although there are some stories of a few ghosts. There's meant to be the ghost of a long bearded knight in there, a white horse, and the Grey Lady as well. There's meant to be a Grey Lady. Castlefields Estate, which isn't far from here, it's got a street called Grey Lady Walk in honour of her. Got back in the car, there's a few people around. More than I expected. I must look a bit of a weirdo. I'm talking to myself. Anyway, significance why I came here to Pritter Castle is because tonight's story features a castle. It's probably my favourite folk tale from round here, called The Laidly Worm of Spindlestowe Heugh. There's a very tenuous link set at Bamburgh Castle rather than Pritter Castle. A bit more history for you. It was laid to siege by the Scots. It was the only castle in Northumberland that they never actually successfully captured. Oh. Right, I'm gonna let myself start that again. I'm gonna get myself away home. Haven't had my lunch yet. So I hope you enjoy the story. Still, one more thing before I head off. If you listen to the video or watch the video, or both even, the story of the Headley cow, Ian's been in touch. He's very happy with what I did with his story, but apparently I pronounced cow wrong. It is coo. Now, I had heard that, I just thought it was northern dialect, but yeah, it's the Headley coo, not the Headley cow. It's spelt with a K, K-O-W, and apparently coo is a form of shape-shifting goblin all of its own. So if there was any doubt that I didn't fully research things before I did the stories, there we go. And thanks for keeping us right, Ian. Right, now on to this story about Bamburgh Castle. About 50 miles north of here, on the coastline, stands Bamburgh Castle, ancient seat of Northumbrian kings. The king was sad. His wife, the queen, had died, leaving him with their young daughter, Margaret, who tried to cheer her father and keep him happy. And she did grow into quite beautiful young lady. The day came that the king decided he would take another wife, and so he set off on the land to search for a woman who would be worthy of being his queen. And he eventually returned with a well-educated and very beautiful woman of high standing. But there were rumours that their love came more from love potions than true love. But she moved into the castle, although she was very unkind and very cruel to the young Princess Margaret, envious of her youth and her beauty. She forced her to dress only in rags and fed her only scraps from the dinner table. Of course, the king seemed blind to all of this. day came when a great feast was called. The lords and ladies and nobles of the land come forward, swear fealty to the king. While this was going on, while the people of the land would bring their offerings to the king and kneel at his foot and proclaim their loyalty to him, proclaim his queen was the most beautiful in all the land, there strode forward a young knight. When his turn came, he fell to one knee, proclaimed his loyalty and fealty to the Lord. But then, to the surprise of many, the horror of some, he went to Princess Margaret, who had been forced to sit in the shadows of the corner. And while he had told the king that he was the mightiest lord in the land, he bowed to the princess and said that surely she was the most beautiful lady in the land. The queen was outraged by this. She stopped the festivities immediately, sent everyone from the great hall, demanded that the young knight be taken, was clapped in chains, thrown into a boat and cast into the North Sea. When all the guests had gone, the Queen went to Margaret, grabbed her. Well, what did you think of your young man and what he said? Well, he seemed very nice. And what of his words? You think that you are more beautiful than me? It is not for me to say. This, the Queen took from her robes a glass vial of dark, foul liquid, grabbed young Margaret's hair, pulled back her head, uncorked the vial, forced the foul liquid down her throat. The king finally seemed to come to his senses. What are you doing to the poor girl? Leave her alone. The queen turned, sneered and snarled at him. The poor princess fell to her knees, coughing and choking. She began to swell in size, her skin cracking, giving way to scales, her neck stretched unnaturally long. Her delicate hands became great claws, reptilian wings sprouted from her back. The king looked in horror. What have you done? The queen turned, cackled at him. You fool, can you not see? I have turned this beautiful young girl into a dragon. Well, what of the young knight? Child Wind, as he was called. Fortune smiled upon him. He was carried out to sea, past the treacherous rocks of the Farne Islands, and across to Denmark. Here he was taken from the boat, freed from his chains, taken to the court there, where he swore loyalty to the King of Denmark and entered his service. And during that time he became strong, and he became wise, and he became just, but always, always he listened for news of what had become of the court of Bamborough, of the young princess, of the king and his questionable queen. Till a ship made fall there. The crew had come from Bamborough. Child Wind was eager for news. The news that greeted him not good news. The sailors told of how the land was under the tyranny, the grip of a terrible dragon, and that the king would allow no one to harm it. For the evil queen who now ruled turned the princess into that terrible dragon, and the king would allow no one to harm it. The people were becoming impatient. The dragon was burning crops, devouring livestock, and it would not be long before someone took up a sword against the dragon. Child Wind was horrified by this news, and he went to a wise woman who lived nearby, some said was a witch. And he sat at her table, and he asked her how he could save the princess, how he could break the curse, how he could free the land from the grip of the terrible queen. The old woman leant forward and looked at Child Wind and saw that he was fair and true, and asked for a bag of gold in return for how he may save the land. It seemed a fair price. The old woman told Child Wind that he must have a new boat made, a craft carved from only rowan wood, and he must go alone. The only way to break the curse was to remember that the dragon was the princess, to kiss it 3 times upon its scales. As for the queen, she wielded a staff which was the source of her power. If that staff could be broken, then so could she. Child Wind thanked the woman, went out, chopped down only rowan trees, made himself a small craft, set off across the sea. As he approached the shoreline, a terrible storm came upon him. There was nothing natural about this storm. But the wise woman knew that rowan wood would protect against this dark magic. And the knight landed his small craft upon the sand in the shadows of the castle. No sooner as he set foot upon the beach than a terrible shadow filled the air, and a great dragon landed before him. Its foul breath, rank and hot with flame, gripped his sword. As the dragon approached, he remembered what the woman had said. When the dragon was close enough, he leant forward and 3 kisses upon its scales. As soon as he had done this, the dragon reared back. It began to shrink and shrivel like a balloon, gas escaping. Vanished, shriveled away, shrunk into a hole in the sand. And from the hole, radiant, stepped Princess Margaret. Well, the king and his court had been watching from the castle, and in their joy and in their relief, they came running down onto the sand. Child Wind went forward and asked for the princess's hand in marriage. The king agreed immediately, and a great cheer went up. The joy was short-lived. Another shadow came down from the castle, a smug smile upon her face. In her hand, a magic staff crackling with power, And as she began to cast a spell, Child Wind leapt forward, gripped the staff from the false queen, snapped it in two. Her foul magic rebounded against her, and she began to spin and scream faster and faster and faster, shrinking as she did so, till there was nothing left of her but a foul black toad. She crept back up the sand and hid the rocks beneath the castle. And there are those to this day say that that toad is still there, that they can see it shifting in the rocks, see its eyes blinking out at them, waiting for its time of revenge. As for Child Wind and Princess Margaret, they were indeed married, and it is said that they lived, and that they lived very happily.